Well, Ben, thank you so much for joining me right here.
Well,
I'm
thank you for
excited
having me.
to
Yeah,
have the NFT.NYC community get to know a bit about you and specifically the stuff that you're passionate about around NFT and film. People might know about the book that you wrote, The Accidental Billionaires, that became the social network movie. You wrote the Bitcoin Billionaires, kind of picking up from that story on the Winklevoss twins. And you even wrote a book about Vegas that became 21, the movie with Kevin Spacey and some other great actors and actresses. And so you are a really successful storyteller. And you've been able to tell these stories that have captured the imagination of our culture. And so I'd love for you to maybe fill in the gaps a little bit
sure.
on your background as an author and a creative. And then we can talk a bit about your perspective on all things NFTs and how it's impacting film.
Sure. I'm the author of about 25 books right now, which sounds like a lot, but people really only read two of them, which was the Facebook story, which became the movie The Social Network, and my book was Bringing Down the House, which became the movie 21 about the MIT Blackjack team. And so I write stories usually about big origin stories, things that are going to change all our lives going forward. I'm always looking for things that are going to be like the next big thing, and I want it to become a giant movie. That's always my goal when I set out to write something. So yeah, that's who I am, and that's what I'm known for mostly. But I've fallen into the NFT space because I see what's happening here as another, seismic shift in the world that we're living in, and I want to be a part of it.
Now, part of your initiation kind of with this industry, learning NFTs, was from the Winklevoss twins. So do you want to give us just a little bit of an understanding of, you write the story the first year of Facebook, they're kind of the bad guys. And you pick up from there and tell more their story about what's happened with
Yeah,
them, with Binance. And then at some point, they introduce you to this concept of non-fungible tokens and what's happening in this industry. Can you give us a little bit of
sure.
insight on that?
Yeah, so when I wrote the book that became The Social Network, I had reached out to them on Facebook of all places, and I met the Winklevi, as I called them in the book. And to me, at the time, they were the bad guys. They walked into the hotel room when I first met them, and they're two giant blonde guys right out of an '80s movie, and you can picture them in skeleton costumes chasing the Karate Kid around the gym, and that's what I wrote. And so at that time, I never thought I'd write about them again. I never thought we'd see them again. And then I read years later that they were the first Bitcoin billionaires, and I was blown away. So I went out to New York and started hanging out with them. And I said, guys, I want to tell this story, the story of crypto through you. And so I spent a year with them and I wrote the book Bitcoin Billionaires. And during that year, I realized I had gotten them vastly wrong in the first book. These were guys who were doing really incredible things, very smart. And they weren't just the antithesis to Mark Zuckerberg, but they really were starting a whole nother movement, this revolution of money. And during our conversations with them, they introduced me to the world of NFTs. They started saying, there's this thing going on. You should take a look at it. This is going to be really big and interesting. And as I looked at it, I realized that for a writer, for creatives, this was really incredible, a way to build a community, to interact with the community that was never possible before. And to me, it seemed like another seismic shift that I didn't know what to do with. Did I want to write about it? Did I want to make a movie about it? And then we get to the next step, where someone reached out to me on Twitter, a guy named Adam Brotman, who is an NFT guru. He created the digital loyalty program for Starbucks and is working with NFTs for them now. And he and I started talking, and a guy named Bunchu, who's a great NFT guy, joined in. And we sort of came up with the idea that I didn't want to just drop an NFT, but I wanted to write a movie about NFTs that my NFT community would partially own with me. So what the Ben Mezrich project is basically 3 NFT drops revolving around things that I write about. If you own one of each of the 3, you get to share in a screenplay with me, 50% of whatever it turns into. So it's a simple idea, sold out very quickly the first drop, and here we are. And it's been awesome. I love this community, and I can't wait to make a big movie about it.
How do you think NFTs will disrupt Hollywood different from disrupting the general publishing industry?
Yeah, big difference. First of all of Hollywood is trying to figure out how to get into this. Every studio I've talked to, studio heads, I've talked to producers, executives, and every conversation revolves around, how does a movie use NFTs to build an audience? How do we create revenue streams using NFTs? How does a star build an NFT community? There's no question that this is going to happen. The question is, how does it happen? How can it be authentic and not just a cash grab? Because the audience is very savvy. The NFT people are not, going to be swayed easily by someone, hopping and dropping an NFT and disappearing. Hollywood has to figure out an organic way to use NFTs to build projects. So I do think it's going to be disruptive in the sense that it's an entirely new way of building a giant audience for something that is incentivized to see that thing succeed. And that's something Hollywood's never really faced before. So I think it's going to be interesting. And I think there will be movies made from NFT communities. And once that happens, you're going to see a lot of the independent production facilities moving in this direction.
How do you think it impacts the future of brand new stories compared to stories that build on one another? Like obviously Rocky, right? Or Rambo. Like these are stories that just kept building and building and building over time. And I imagine NFTs being applied to these types of stories and communities compared to brand new, fresh stories. And so how do you see it being important with those two totally different type of rhythms in the industry?
When I see like the franchise type things like a Rambo or I don't know, a Marvel or anything like that, the immediate thing that comes to mind is the whole collectibles market and the idea of NFTs as collectibles, because people want NFTs that speak to them, that they're emotionally attached to, and that they collect and hold on to, despite everyone around them telling them that they're crazy, right? And that immediately makes me think of people who love Marvel or people who love, whatever it is, Rocky. I think that there's going to be a huge market for pieces to own a piece of something like that. That's going to be very important. And then you're going to see new projects being able to spawn out of communities, because the hardest thing to do is to break a new story in Hollywood, because you don't know whether there's going to be an audience for it. But what NFTs do is it actually puts the audience first. It's the whole Web3 idea that you don't launch a movie if you don't have 100,000 people interested in the NFT around it. And so in that respect, you could launch a new franchise off of a community that's already existing, and the community is going to decide what's going to succeed or not. And that's the power of this. And I think that's the same with authors. Why, have a publisher decide what book is going to be a bestseller? Why not have 10,000 people who bought the NFT for a book making that decision? And that's what I hope to do with my project is launch new authors on it, who can launch via an NFT.
You have 3 different drops, and you've gone through the process of not just looking and telling stories and looking how it's going to impact, but actually doing your own NFTs. What has been delightful, kind of surprising, like, wow, that went so much better than I expected? And what's maybe been a hurdle in this process that you're like, that kind of caught me off guard. I didn't quite expect.
There's a lot of that.
Okay.
I would say the delightful side of it is that the community is really positive and fun. We have a Discord. It's small. It's like 10,000 people. But, we're watching movies together. We watched The Social Network, and I was live talking about it. And people from all walks of life, very diverse people from all around the world. And, you have this image of what an NFT owner looks like, and you don't realize that it's everybody. I mean, there are single mothers out there. There are people from all ethnicities, people from all walks of life doing this, from people with tons of money to people who have no money, and this is the first thing they've ever bought. So that was really positive for me in seeing this. The negatives, of course, is just there's lots of scamming going on. It's a wild west. And, realizing you can't open a DM from Discord, right? Realizing that, people are trying to snake other people out of projects and rug pulls. Like seeing it in action was really wild, because I wrote about crypto. I understand there's been lots of scams, but I think in the NFT world, there's some very, very sophisticated scammers out there who are able to mock up sites and do fake drops and steal stuff so, easily, that obviously change has to happen. And hopefully we'll get out of the Wild West phase before too long, and some of this stuff will be weeded out. But yeah, I think that, listen, if you haven't been scammed at some point, you haven't really been in the NFT game, right? Because just about everybody has a story of something happening or almost losing something. And I think that's part of it. Yeah.
Well, how do you think that's any different than what creatives and authors have faced in Hollywood in the traditional world, because there's always been, when there's a lot of money involved,
Yeah.
and power and influence, there's always those that will do whatever they can to
Right. Well, the
take from
big
others.
difference, I think, is that in the real world and in Hollywood, the anonymity factor isn't really there. And there are pros and cons to being anonymous. The fact that you don't know for sure who is dropping an NFT or anything behind it is a dangerous thing in some respects. And in Hollywood, if you get scammed, at least you know who's scamming you, right? And you might still get scammed, but there are faces behind it and usually names behind it. And it's pretty unusual that someone out of the blue anonymously can scam you and get away with it for very long. While in the NFT space, I mean, I think the rule is that people are anonymous, and it's an exception when people know who everybody is. And I launched my project because I'm a known quantity and I want people to know who's behind it. And I feel like that helps because people know I'm going to be here tomorrow, right? It's not like I'm going to fly by night and disappear. So listen, I understand the point of anonymity, and you want to be able to be free, and that's crypto is great because, you know, to some respect, you don't have to worry about everyone knowing your business. But on the other side, it can be dangerous. And I think people have to be aware that it's a different world when you allow people to be anonymous.
What are you looking forward to when you get to be with the whole community, right? I mean, so many
Yeah.
of us will
Well,
be
this will be
there.
my first conference in this world. I mean, I've done a million book conferences and I've spoken in front of millions of audiences about my books and my movies, but I've never done anything really like this with people who are into the NFT world to this extent. So I'm learning. You know, I like to say in my project, anyways, I'm not the tech guy. I'm like the pretty face. I don't really understand the contracts and all of that stuff. What I understand is the bigger picture. And so I'm really looking forward to being around people who really know this, the OGs in the world. I love talking to people with great stories. And as I'm writing this movie and book about the NFT space, I need stories. I need to hear it all. So being in a crowd like that who really, I mean, I'm going to hear every story you can think of in a matter of a few days. And that's my bread and butter. I love the idea of someone coming from nowhere, stumbling into this world and suddenly making a fortune, or someone else, an artist who maybe couldn't break in another way, breaking in this fashion. Those are the stories that really turn me on. So I'm just looking forward to hearing all of this stuff.
If people are hearing like, oh, Ben has to know this story, or I have the right contact to get this story.
Yeah.
How do people get a hold of you if they want to help bring
Yeah. So
stories?
Twitter's the easiest. I'm Ben Mezrich on Twitter, but there's a link tree there that'll take you to our Discord. And actually, people are pitching stories. So people who've bought my Ben FT, as we call it, friends with Ben FTs, they're part of the process of me writing this movie. So people are pitching stories all day long, and I'm talking to them, interviewing them. So yeah, reach out to me on Twitter or on my Discord. Just Ben Mezrich, my name, and you'll find me. And I love it when people reach out. I'll tell you, the social network started with a random email at 2 a.m. Someone sent me an email and said, my best friend founded Facebook and no one's ever heard of him. And it was Eduardo. And so from there, that became the biggest movie of that year. So I'm always waiting for that email. I love hearing it. So come find me for sure.
Well, I'm glad I asked that. It is going to be fun to have you be a part of the community this year in June, as we're there in Times Square, June 20th to the 23rd for NFT.NYC. I think a lot of people are going to be looking forward to engaging with you. Obviously, you've had this incredible success with telling stories. And I think a lot of people are motivated to have you tell the stories in the NFT space, good and bad, right? Because everything is intriguing, all the things that have happened and are happening. So Ben, thank you for joining me. For anybody that's watching us, thank you for your attention. And I look forward to being back with another conversation very soon. Ben, have a wonderful day.